In 2003, 5 boys walked into the Montana wilderness for a routine overnight camping trip. They were laughing, racing each other on the trail, their flashlights cutting through the pine trees like fireflies. By morning, they were gone. No bodies, no trail, no explanation. Just 5 empty sleeping bags and a silence that would last 20 years. The boys were Tyler Morrison, 13, the natural leader who carried the map, Jacob Sullivan, 12, everyone called him Jake, the joker who kept spirits high. Noah Bennett, 12, quiet but observant, always taking mental notes. Ethan Crawford, 11, the artist who sketched everything he saw. And Lucas Harper, 10, the youngest, small for his age but determined to keep up with the older boys. Pine Ridge Summer Camp had operated since 1952 without a single serious incident. Until that night. August 15, 2003. Location: Pine Ridge Summer Camp, Glacier County, Montana. The morning mist hung low over the camp when Counselor Brad Hutchinson reached the overnight site at 6:47 a.m. He expected to find 5 boys around a dead campfire, probably complaining about the cold. Instead, he found their sleeping bags arranged in a perfect circle, undisturbed, as if the boys had simply evaporated from inside them. The backpacks were still there, untouched. Tyler's compass sat on top of his bag, pointing north. Jake's harmonica lay in the dirt beside his sleeping spot. Noah's journal was open to a blank page, his pencil placed carefully across it. Ethan's sketchbook showed a half-finished drawing of the mountain ridge. Luke's teddy bear, the one he'd hidden from the other boys, peeked out from under his pillow. Brad's first thought was a prank. These kids were probably hiding in the trees, waiting to jump out. But after 10 minutes of calling, then 20, then 30, his voice grew hoarse and desperate. The silence that answered back was absolute. By noon, search and rescue teams flooded the forest. Dogs tracked the boys' scent to a creek about 300 yards from camp, then lost it completely. Not gradually, not confused. Lost. As if they'd been lifted into the air. The FBI arrived within 48 hours. Agent Sarah Coleman, fresh from Quantico, treated it as an abduction from the start, but abduction required evidence. Tire tracks, footprints, signs of struggle. There was nothing. The crime scene techs found one anomaly, a single adult boot print near the creek, size 11, deep enough to suggest someone carrying weight. But the print led nowhere. It simply stopped. The parents arrived in waves. Tom Morrison, Tyler's father, a Marine veteran who immediately joined the search. Rebecca Sullivan, Jake's single mother, who clutched her son's school photo and wouldn't let go. The Bennetts, Noah's parents, both teachers who'd trusted the camp completely. David Crawford, Ethan's dad, who kept saying he's scared of the dark over and over. And the Harpers, Luke's grandparents who'd raised him, now facing every grandparent's worst nightmare. For 3 weeks, the search expanded. National Guard, volunteers from 6 states, helicopters with thermal imaging. They found nothing. Not a shoe, not a thread, not a candy wrapper. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. September 8, 2003. Location: FBI Field Office, Helena, Montana. Agent Coleman stared at the map spread across her desk. 5 red pins marked the last known location. She'd interviewed every counselor, every camper, every staff member. The stories were consistent, too consistent. Nobody heard anything unusual. Nobody saw lights. Nobody noticed anyone who didn't belong. But there was one detail that nagged at her. 3 campers in the neighboring site, about 200 yards away, reported the same thing independently. Around 2 a.m., they'd heard what sounded like a diesel engine idling. Not moving, just running. They'd assumed it was a maintenance truck, but the camp's maintenance log showed no vehicles out that night. Coleman pulled the personnel files again. Every adult at the camp had been cleared. Background checks, alibis, polygraphs for those who volunteered. All except one. Dennis Carr, the night security guard, had quit abruptly 2 days after the disappearance. Said he couldn't handle the stress. He'd moved to Oregon, left no forwarding address. She made a note. Find Dennis Carr, October 2003 to December 2022, the years between. The case went cold within a year. The FBI kept it technically open, but resources shifted to newer cases with actual leads. The parents formed a support group that met monthly, then yearly, then stopped meeting at all. Tyler's parents divorced in 2005. Jake's mother moved to California and never spoke publicly about her son again. The Bennetts had another child in 2006, a daughter they protected fiercely. Ethan's father became an advocate for missing children, traveling the country to speak at events. The Harpers aged rapidly, their health declining until they both passed in 2019, never knowing what happened to Luke. Pine Ridge Summer Camp closed permanently in 2004. The land was sold to a conservation trust. The building stood empty, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Local teenagers occasionally broke in, looking for ghosts or thrills, but they never stayed long. Something about the place felt wrong, they said, like it was waiting. February 18, 2023. Location: FBI Headquarters, Washington, D.C. The email arrived at 3:22 a.m. in the FBI's tip-in box. No subject line. The sender's address was a random string of characters from a disposable account. The message was brief. Pine Ridge, under the old war bunker. They weren't taken, they were kept. Building 7. Go now before he moves them again. The duty officer almost deleted it. The FBI received hundreds of false tips daily, but something about the specificity caught his attention. Building 7. The camp had only 6 official buildings. He forwarded it to the cold case unit. Agent Marcus Webb, Coleman's successor on the case, read it that morning. He pulled the original camp surveys. There it was, barely visible on a 1967 geological survey. A small square marked Civil Defense Shelter No. 7, about half a mile from the main camp, built during the Cold War, then abandoned. Within 6 hours, Webb had a team assembled and a warrant signed. February 20th, 2023. Location: Pine Ridge Forest, Montana. The bunker entrance was exactly where the survey indicated, hidden beneath decades of fallen branches and deliberate camouflage. The metal door was rusted but recently oiled. Fresh scratches around the lock suggested it had been opened within the last few months. Webb's team breached at dawn. The stairs descended 30 feet into darkness. Their flashlights revealed a corridor with concrete walls, remarkably well preserved. The air was stale but circulating. Someone had maintained the ventilation system. The first room was empty except for 5 folding cots with thin mattresses. Boys' clothing hung from hooks on the wall. Jeans, t-shirts, sneakers, sizes that would fit 10 to 13-year-olds. But the labels were wrong. Some were brands that didn't exist until 2008, 2012, even 2015. The second room made Webb's blood run cold. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all 5 boys at different ages. Tyler at 13, then 14, then 15. Jake growing taller, his face changing. Noah's hair getting longer. Ethan's jawline sharpening. Luke losing his baby fat. They'd been photographed for years after they vanished. In the center of the room sat a metal filing cabinet. Webb opened it with gloved hands. Inside were detailed logs, handwritten in neat block letters, daily schedules, meal plans, lesson plans. The header on each page read, Reintegration Protocol. One entry from September 2003. Subjects adjusting to new environment. T remains resistant. J showing signs of Stockholm Syndrome. N has stopped asking about parents. E draws constantly, must limit paper supply. L cries at night but improving. Another from March 2004. Phase 2 initiated. Identity reformation beginning. T now responds to Michael. J accepts Christopher. N answers to Andrew. E believes he is Daniel. L successful transition to Matthew. The final entry was dated November 2022, just 3 months ago. Project compromised, initiating dispersal protocol, subjects prepared for final placement. The third room contained the worst discovery, a wall of filing cabinets with psychological evaluations, medical records, dental charts, and 5 small boxes, each labeled with a name. Inside Tyler's box, a tooth, hair samples, and a note, DNA preserved for potential future verification. But it was the fourth room that provided the breakthrough. A computer, password protected, but not encrypted. The FBI tech specialist cracked it within hours. It contained thousands of hours of video footage, labeled by date. Webb clicked on one from 2005. The screen showed all 5 boys, now clearly older, sitting at a table in what looked like a classroom. They were wearing different clothes, their hair styled differently. A man's voice off camera said, "Tell me your names." One by one, they responded with names that weren't theirs, but their eyes. Their eyes were vacant, disconnected, like they were reciting lines. February 22, 2023. Location: FBI Field Office, Helena, Montana. Webb assembled his team in the conference room. The evidence was overwhelming, but led to more questions than answers. Who took them? Where were they now? The dispersal protocol suggested they'd been released, but where? The computer contained one more crucial file, a folder labeled Placement Records. Inside were documents suggesting the boys had been given new identities and integrated into society. Foster care records, school enrollments, even college applications, all with different names, different histories, different families who believed they were adopting troubled teens with amnesia or trauma-induced memory loss. According to the records, Michael Davis, originally Lucas Harper, had been placed with a family in Denver in 2008. Christopher Mills, Jake, went to a family in Seattle. Andrew Foster, Noah, was in Chicago. Daniel Rivers, Ethan, in Miami. And Michael Thompson, Tyler, in Boston. Webb's team immediately began tracking these identities. What they found shattered everyone. Michael Davis, the identity given to Lucas Harper, had died by suicide in Denver in 2019. He was 26. His adoptive parents said he'd always struggled with nightmares and identity confusion, often claiming his name wasn't really Michael. He'd left a note that said only, "I remember the forest." The search for Christopher Mills led to Seattle, where they found a young man working as a software engineer. When agents approached him, he looked at them with recognition and said, "I've been waiting for you." DNA confirmed it. This was Jake Sullivan. But Jake had no memory of being Jake. He remembered growing up in foster care, being adopted at 15, going to high school in Seattle. The memories of Pine Ridge, his mother, his real life, all gone. Except in dreams, he said. In dreams, he was someone else. February 25, 2023. Location: Seattle, Washington. The reunion between Jake and his mother Rebecca was captured on security footage at the FBI office. She hadn't seen him in 20 years. He didn't recognize her at all. She sobbed. He stood there, uncomfortable, like a stranger forced into an embrace he didn't understand. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I don't remember you. I wish I did, but I don't." The FBI psychologist explained it as systematic memory suppression, possibly through a combination of drugs, hypnosis, and behavioral conditioning. Whoever had taken them had literally rebuilt their identities from scratch. The search continued for the other 3. Andrew Foster in Chicago turned out to be Noah Bennett. Like Jake, he had no memory of his real identity. He was married, had a 2-year-old daughter, worked as an accountant. When shown photos of his parents, he shook his head. "I've never seen these people before." Daniel Rivers was found in Miami working as a graphic designer. Ethan Crawford, the boy who loved to sketch, was still drawing but didn't know why he was so good at it. His adoptive parents said he'd come to them at 14 with severe trauma-induced amnesia. But Michael Thompson, Tyler Morrison, was nowhere to be found. The Boston address led to an apartment that had been vacant for 2 years. The landlord remembered him vaguely. Quiet kid, kept to himself, moved out suddenly one night, left everything behind. March 1st, 2023. Location: Pine Ridge Forest, Montana. Webb returned to the bunker with a forensics team for a deeper search. In a hidden compartment behind a false wall, they found more evidence. VHS tapes dating back to 2003, showing the initial abduction. The boys hadn't been taken violently. They'd been drugged, something in their dinner at camp, then simply carried away while unconscious. The man on the tapes was careful never to show his face, but his voice was distinctive. Calm, educated, with a slight Midwest accent. He referred to himself as the shepherd and the boys as the flock. One tape from 2004 showed him explaining his purpose to the camera. "Society labels them as missing, but I've found them. I'm giving them what their parents couldn't, a chance to become who they're meant to be, free from the limitations of their birth identities." The FBI ran voice recognition against their databases. No matches. But then Webb remembered something. Dennis Carr, the security guard who'd quit after the disappearance. They'd never found him in Oregon. March 5th, 2023. Location: FBI headquarters, Washington, D.C. The manhunt for Dennis Carr revealed he'd never existed before 2001. The identity was manufactured. Social Security number belonged to a child who died in 1978. The references on his camp application were fake. The address he'd given led to an empty lot. But facial recognition from his camp ID photo got a hit from an unexpected source. Dr. Kenneth Marsh, a psychiatrist who'd lost his license in 1999 for unauthorized experiments on identity dissolution. He'd published papers on therapeutic identity reconstruction before being discredited by the medical community. His last known address was in Wyoming, where he'd supposedly died in a car accident in 2002. But when the FBI exhumed the grave, they found it empty except for bags of sand. March 10th, 2023. Location: Livingston, Montana. The tip came from a gas station owner who recognized Marsh's photo on the news. "That's Mr. Campbell, comes in every month for supplies, lives up on the old Harrison property." The FBI surrounded the property at dawn. It was a modest cabin, isolated, with a clear view of all approaches. Perfect for someone who didn't want surprise visitors. Marsh was inside, sitting at his kitchen table, drinking coffee. He didn't resist. He smiled when they entered. 20 years, he said. "I gave them 20 good years, new lives, new chances. I saved them from becoming their parents' failures." In his confession, Marsh explained everything. He'd studied the boys for months before taking them, chosen them specifically. Tyler, whose military father was pushing him toward a life he didn't want. Jake, whose single mother could barely provide. Noah, whose parents were getting divorced. Ethan, whose father was an alcoholic. Luke, whose parents were dead. "I gave them better lives," he insisted. "They're successful now, happy. They wouldn't have been if I'd left them where they were." When told about Lucas's suicide, he showed the first crack in his composure. That wasn't supposed to happen. The protocol should have held. March 15th, 2023. Location: Federal Courthouse, Helena, Montana. During Marsh's arraignment, something extraordinary happened. Tyler Morrison walked into the courtroom. He'd been living in Portland under another assumed identity, having somehow broken free from the Michael Thompson programming 2 years earlier. He'd been searching for answers, following news about missing children, when he saw the reports about Pine Ridge. Unlike the others, Tyler had recovered some memories. Fragments, he said. Flashes of the forest, the other boys, his real name. He'd spent 2 years in therapy trying to piece together who he really was. He testified that day, standing between two lives, the one stolen and the one imposed. "He took 5 boys, Tyler said, looking directly at Marsh, "and he tried to kill us without actually killing us. He murdered who we were." The reunion with his father was unlike the others. Tom Morrison, now 63, gray and weathered, grabbed his son and held him like he was still 13. And Tyler, against all odds, remembered him. Not everything, but enough. Enough to say, "Dad, it's me." March 20th, 2023. Location: FBE Behavioral Analysis Unit, Quantico, Virginia. The case file for Pine Ridge grew to thousands of pages. The psychological evaluations of the 4 surviving boys revealed the depth of Marsh's programming. He'd used a combination of hypnosis, selective drugs that affected memory formation, and intensive behavioral conditioning. He'd literally rebuilt them from the ground up, creating elaborate false histories that their minds accepted as real. The process had taken 3 years of intensive work in the bunker. After that, he'd placed them with carefully selected families who believed they were taking in troubled teens with trauma-induced amnesia. He'd monitored them remotely, checking in periodically under various pretenses. But the most disturbing discovery came from Marsh's personal journals, found hidden in his cabin. He'd done this before. References to previous flocks dating back to the 1980s. The FBI opened investigations in 6 other states where similar disappearances had occurred. April 1st, 2023. Location: various locations across America. The 4 surviving boys faced an impossible choice. They had 2 complete lives in their heads now, one real but fragmented, one false but complete. Jake chose to stay in Seattle, maintaining his life as Christopher Mills but knowing the truth. Noah returned to Chicago to his wife and daughter, who only knew him as Andrew. Ethan remained in Miami, continuing his art, signing his pieces with both names. Tyler was different. He chose to reclaim his original identity fully, moving back to Montana, working with his father. He became an advocate for missing children, using his unique experience to help others. The families were left in a strange limbo. Their sons were alive, but not the sons they had lost. Rebecca Sullivan moved to Seattle to be near Jake, accepting whatever relationship he could give her. The Bennetts chose to stay away, saying it was too painful to see their son as a stranger. Ethan's father started visiting Miami monthly, slowly building something new, and Luke's grandparents, had they lived, would never have known their grandson had already been gone 4 years before they passed. Epilogue, December 2023. Doctor. Kenneth Marsh was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. During his sentencing, he maintained he'd done nothing wrong. "I gave them better lives," he repeated. "Ask them if they're not happier now." The Pine Ridge case changed how the FBI approaches long-term missing children cases. The idea that someone could successfully steal and reprogram human identities was no longer theoretical. It had happened. And if Marsh's journals were accurate, it had happened many times before. Tyler Morrison stood at the site of the old camp on the 20th anniversary of the disappearance. The forest had reclaimed most of it, but he could still find the spot where their sleeping bags had been found. He'd brought something with him, 5 stones, each carved with a name. Not the names Marsh had given them, but their real names. He placed them in a circle, the same formation as their sleeping bags that night. Tyler, Jake, Noah, Ethan, Luke. "We survived," he said to the forest. "In different ways, but we survived." As he walked away, he thought he heard something in the wind. Laughter, maybe. 5 boys racing through the trees, flashlights cutting through the darkness, still together somewhere in time, still who they were meant to be. The FBI file remains open. Marsh refuses to reveal if there were others. Somewhere in America, there might be more people living lives that aren't their own, with memories that aren't real, answering to names that were never theirs. They estimate at least 20 more cases. They're still searching.